Good afternoon, parish orphans and retrogrades. Timothy Gordon here with a special Our Lady of Guadalupe show with my friends, Joseph and Monique Gonzales from my hometown, Bakersfield, California. They are Our Lady of Guadalupe experts, and as luck would have it, they were available today on Cinco de Mayo, a different direction of Spanish Mexican holiday. But nevertheless, it was fortuitous that you guys could join me today, and thanks a million for doing so. I'm honored.
Great to be here. Yeah, thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, I mean, what I want to do in May, even though like OLG's feast day is December the 12th, which it always feels inappropriate to me to have any feast day other than May for any of Our Lady's apparitions, is unpack in the month of May several of these mainstream Marian apparitions in ways that are less covered. So today with you guys, we've talked about Our Lady of Guadalupe. We did extensive coverage on Flower World in an earlier Rules for Retrogrades. I think that was a late fall or early winter show over a year ago. And it's high time that we renew it. So could you guys tell me right off the bat, and my viewers out there, the parish orphans and retrogrades, why they don't have to worry? It's a church approved apparition for one, but the devil's in the details. Why should they not worry about religious syncretism when it comes to the efficaciousness of Our Lady of Guadalupe converting so many Mexicans? This isn't a mashup of a goddess that they were already worshiping there before the bringing of Christianity, right? This isn't Pachamama, the prequel, right?
Right. Well, go ahead. Okay. Well, see, here's the issue. If you look at the historical record, and if you really study early colonial history, it's not a problem at all. I mean, there's plenty of evidence to show that the apparition of Guadalupe with Juan Diego actually happened in 1531, that there were close to 9 million conversions. It's very clear. But if you actually read the secular scholarship on it, you're going to run into many pitfalls right away. I mean, you look at a chapter in a very prominent academic book, and it's titled "The Myth of Guadalupe." Why Juan Diego did not exist. There's actually a book called Guadalupe Tonantzin, which actually is supposedly the name of this Aztec goddess, which we're going to refute these point by point. But, to those of us who are believers, we usually see Guadalupe literature as devotional material. There's very few kind of scholastically rigorous books which actually tackle kind of in an apologetic way, a way to defend Guadalupe against these attacks. And believe me, these attacks are real. Yeah. So, and then the problem is, if you're a college student and you're taking some sort of Latin American religions a study course or something, or survey, you're going to lose your faith. I mean, you're like fish in a barrel. And,
we've heard many stories of this.
The statistics bear it out. I mean, you're going to become a nun after you graduate, and not a good nun. You're going to be an NONE type nun once you graduate from college. There's something like a 40% chance that you're going to lose your faith. So there aren't that many people out there that have taken this challenge on to basically be an apologia of Guadalupe. And this wasn't our intention, as you know from our first interview, that we wanted to talk about Flower World. And we're really excited about that. We've been working on that book. But we found that there were too many issues that came up even as we gave talks, like, oh, isn't Guadalupe this Aztec goddess Tonantzin? And then if we didn't tackle that, people couldn't hear what we wanted to say. So
it'd be dishonest.
It would have been dishonest. So we thought, oh gosh, we really kind of have to tackle these issues and really research them well and really begin to refute them one by one. And that's really this side project really has come about.
I'd love for you guys to do a quick refutation in a minute, but maybe Monique, if you would just catch up my viewing audience out there, exactly why Joseph would mention that to a secular humanist professor or an apparatchik of any sort against the church. why would Our Lady of Guadalupe be such a heavy target? Why would she draw such a heavy academic target load? It has something to do with 9 million conversions of the pagan Aztecs in like a decade, right? That's got something to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, as we know, Our Lady of Guadalupe is credited with the development of the nation of Mexico. She's considered a national symbol and the unifying factor between the Spanish and the indigenous. So if we're going to take a step back and think of what's an easy answer as to why they get so much flack, it might be just simply the tremendous massive influence that she has on everybody's mindset in Latin America. So it stands to reason. I mean, most of the stuff that we've encountered, just to give a quick little anecdote that happened at a presentation we did in Bowers Museum, we had about 300 people there in Santa Ana, and we were giving the presentation, and during the question and answer period, we had one lady stand up in the back and say, you know, when I had my first day in university, the professor stood up there and he said, if anybody in here believes in Our Lady of Guadalupe, they need to pack up their stuff and leave the room right now because it's completely, totally irrational. So that kind of protracted attack only makes sense if people are feeling threatened. And unfortunately, I think we've seen that a lot of devotees to Our Lady of Guadalupe tend to give the argument that it's a matter of faith. It's only an emotional knowledge that you can rely on. That's a simple story. And which is unfortunate, but part of our mission statement is to bridge that gap between this extreme skepticism and an extreme, I want to be careful on how I say that. How would you say it? Like devotion that says that you can't be completely rational when it comes to Our Lady of Guadalupe. It can only be an issue of the heart rather than an issue of faith and reason.
Fideistic, which isn't good, right? We don't want a fideistic devotion to any of the Marian apparitions, right? If anything, this enables the slings and arrows of our opponents, right? I mean, what's the teeth? If you were to steel man, either of you, if you were to steel man what that professor that Monique mentioned a second ago would say against the veracity of Our Lady of Guadalupe, how would you do it?
Oh gosh, it's basically assumed. It's accepted in academic circles that Guadalupe is actually one of the main points. I mean, there's different theories that have come through the years, and we'll go into depths. It's changed over the years. We can go into it, but basically the assumption is that Guadalupe is the main example of Mexican Catholicism, which is syncretism, which is a mixture of pagan thought and Catholicism that have blended together to kind of create a unique Mexican Catholicism. And it's just assumed that, but you have to dig deep. You have to go in, and there are a few people that are actually taking this mantle up and fighting. For example, Timothy Matovina over at Notre Dame University, he has really provided a lot of pushback to some of these, snarky critics of Guadalupe. And really fought them tooth and nail. But there's not that many people. I think it's kind of falls into the idea that if you're in an academic setting, you got to kind of keep your mouth shut if you want to retain your tenure or receive tenure. So it's a real fight out there. It's not only within the American academic circles, but really in Mexico, there's been a fight. There has been a drive to wipe out Catholicism in Mexico. Everybody knows about the Cristero Wars in the 1920s, but there was another period before that called the Reforma, which was in 1850, which was just as bad and almost destroyed all of the historical evidence that we have about Guadalupe was almost wiped out during that time period. And if you're interested, we can go into that, but it's a battle. Even the bombing that maybe your audience knows about, that there was a bomb that was placed in front of the image of Guadalupe in 1921. Well, that is actually connected to the precursor to the Cristero Wars. There was actually they wanted to wipe Guadalupe out.
Yeah. In fact, along with that bomb instance, what occurred was that it was an employee of the Secretariat of the Presidency who came in there with soldiers who were dressed as civilians to protect him while he did it. So it's
while he hid the bomb
on the front of the altar, and the candlesticks and the crucifix were all bent, and the tilma wasn't affected.
Was miraculously saved.
It was miraculously saved, but the whole situation was just saturated in the anti-Catholic sentiment that was just awash in Mexico at that time.
And if I can add, in that same year, 1921, the main account that we have, the actual narrative of Guadalupe, a published version in 1649 in the indigenous language Nahuatl. There were only 2 copies that were left over from the 1600s. In 1921, those 2 original remaining copies somehow disappeared.
Disappeared.
And it was only through the efforts of these heroic people that came along and saved the story that we even know about this. So, and we can get into that if you want, but it is a real battle. I'm telling you right now.
I'd like to draw this out for people, and I know I kind of said this before, but picture it: 9 million conversions of indigenous people, the peoples that presently are the subject of the direst, dearest hopes of the critical theorists for staging the proletarian world revolution is indigenous peoples. Just get ready, for this Olympics at the end of this month. They focus, the globalists, the communists, they focus on indigenous peoples because this is kind of the new proletariat. The Marxists have brought their hopes and dreams on the mantle of the indigenous. And what they're hoping to do is to turn, race against race, ethnicity against ethnicity, and always categorize Christianity and Christians as conquistadors, whatever. Okay. So the fact that within a decade or a decade and a half, Our Lady had converted 9 million. I mean, that's point A, right? 9 million conversions is the most ever. Like 3,000 conversions by the apostles, and Acts of the Apostles was their best day ever. 9 million in a few years, a short span of years. And then it's indigenous, and it is the Europeans who brought the faith first, and then Mary followed upon this. She chose her timing well. It's providence. So this would be a kind of heavenly endorsement of the European, I don't know, not necessarily, I guess the conquistador. I mean, the mission of bringing God, to say nothing of golden glory. So this goes adversely against, diametrically against what these folks, the radicals who run academia, hope to achieve. And so they jealously guard the narrative that Our Lady of Guadalupe has to be false, because not only is she doing A and B, but she's accomplishing C. She's showing that these indigenous religions are pagan, they're vile, they're evil, and her message of heaven is winsome, and it's winsome to not just European but indigenous American in the New World alike. So I think that's really important that people get this big picture. Our Lady of Guadalupe, as much as I know about Fatima, I never studied Our Lady of Guadalupe as much, and that's why I'm pleased to have you guys on. You mentioned that there was some sort of back connection to Cinco de Mayo. What was that?
Okay. Well, Cinco de Mayo is a celebration of a Mexican victory over the French, not the Spanish, by the way, which happened in 1862 at the Battle of Puebla, May 5th, of course. What happened was the Liberal Party was invaded by France in 1861. The Battle of Puebla was not the definitive battle that drove the French out. The French actually were there for 5 more years in 1867 with the execution of Maximilian, the Habsburg emperor that was placed there by Napoleon III, the nephew of Napoleon Bonaparte. Actually, Maximilian and his wife Carlota came in 1864. And then, of course, what really ended up driving the French out of Mexico was really on 2 factors. Number one, the United States was busy with their Civil War. The leader of the party, of the Liberal Party, was Benito Juarez, and he was good friends with Lincoln. A lot of people don't know this. And once the Civil War was over, the United States provided help to Mexico to throw out the French. That was one issue. The second issue was that Napoleon III kind of grew disinterested in helping out Maximilian. He kind of hung him out to dry, basically. And it was really because of that that the French were taken out. Now, the thing is that I told you about a little bit about the Reforma Wars of 1864 to 1861, led by Benito Juarez. The Liberal Party, one of the main things that they wanted to do was to get rid of the Catholic, primarily land holdings, and also all of their documentation and all their artwork and all their gold and things. They actually wanted to destroy that.
So they seized the holdings, and then they systematically started getting rid of them piecemeal.
Right. And the reason the reason why it ties in is because of this one guy named Jose Fernando Ramirez. We call him JFR for short. And Monique, tell us who was JFR.
So Jose Fernando Ramirez, he's kind of an important guy because he's a politician and a statesman who has a really high position in the Mexican government, even under Benito Juarez. During that time of the Reforma in the mid-1800s. And part of the reason why he's so important for us as well as the nation of Mexico is because he was in an unusual position of when a law happened in 1859 to seize all the church holdings and to grab all the monasteries and the convents and the universities. And he was in charge of seizing all the libraries. And this is important for us because he
was a closet devout Catholic.
He was a closet devout Catholic, and this comes out later on in the next decade. But because of him, we have access to the Nica Mopoa, which is the apparition of Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Well, let me explain what happened. What he did is he actually took the material and he hid it. He hid it in the National Library. And then when the French were ousted in 1867, he left. He went to Bonn, Germany, and he took a lot of this primary historical Guadalupe documents. And
Specifically Guadalupe.
The Nican Mopoa is the original account. There's the published version of 1649 that I kind of briefly talked about, the one that was almost lost in 1921. There was an earlier version that is credited to the year 1556 and thought that an indigenous acculturated Indian named Antonio Valeriano wrote that earlier version. Now it's incomplete, but it's important because it's the oldest version of the narrative of Guadalupe and Juan Diego. He flees to Bonn, Germany because of the result of the battle with the French. He flees in 1867. He dies in 1873. His heirs sell his entire collection in Bonn, Germany, put it up for auction in 1880 in London, okay? A gentleman from New York named James, a multimillionaire at that time, philanthropist, buys this collection of Guadalupe rare, one-of-a-kind rare documents. It's even in the catalog. There's a catalog. And I think it's like catalog number 378 or 370, something like that. And it gives a description of it. He buys it. His holding is actually at the New York Public Library.
That is the Lenox collection.
The Lenox collection. And the now famous collection of Guadalupe material is called the Guadalupanos Monumentos Guadalupanos. It's actually in the New York Public Library. So our earliest encounter of Guadalupe is in New York City via Bonn.
Because of everything that's happening.
Because of what happened during the French occupation. So that's how it's tied together. And by the way, the Aztec poems that we were dealing with, those were also part of the collection, the Cantares Mexicanos that we talked about so much on your
the Flowerland. We did a whole show on it. Tell me this. One, I think these questions are coupled together. People in May, because May is like Fatima month. It's coming up in 8 days, May 13th. Big deal. And I've always known much more about Fatima than Guadalupe. Fatima, Akita, some argue La Salette, though La Salette's more controversial, even among trads. These apparitions clearly bespeak an agenda for the good guys, for the faithful Catholics, to be pursued, and first to just be kind of uncovered and then pursued by faithful Catholics in the 21st century. it's relevant. You know, I mean, the third secret of Fatima, is it uncovered? Is it fully revealed? Whether it is or it isn't, Fatima just begs out, cries out its own relevance, res ipsa loquitur. But so tell people, what I'll ask you a two-part question so you can think of this first one as you answer the second. Tell people, why is Guadalupe as relevant now, not just as something that, you know, reaches back to the past, an important world historical conversion event in Mexico, but why is it important for the 21st century? And I think a big part of that answer might be yielded by the answer to my second question. Just tell my viewers who know less about Guadalupe some of the basics about the miraculous tilma and the flowers and Juan Diego himself. Like last time we got all into the details, I think the tilma has much to do with why Guadalupe is relevant now, but people are less drawn to it, maybe even Americans, even though she's ours, she's on our side of the pond, because it's scandal ridden because of these, you know, pain in the neck academics, but it's not as scandal ridden in terms of secrets, covered up secrets, partially revealed secrets, you know, doom and gloom. So do that two-parter. Maybe one of each of you could tackle that. Why is Guadalupe relevant, and what does the tilma tell us? Juan Diego's tilma.
Well, there's a couple of different points I think we might want to come up. I think the one I want to lead off with, though, is the concept of hope, which is kind of very lacking in today's times just because of everything that's going on. I mean, something that I've encountered, Joseph and I have talked a lot about this, is from the theory that we've developed, we recognize God's control of history, his control of the timeline. I mean, when we, this is where I'm gonna have to dip into our theory a little bit.
Sure.
You know, the whole understanding that if it's true that God laid a story deep in the history of the American indigenous, thousands of years in the making, in order so that the indigenous of the Americas would be so steeped in it so that by the 1500s, when the Spaniards come in and Our Lady Guadalupe appears, they'll know exactly what it is, and they'll know how to respond and be baptized just as quickly. In my mind, that translates to the whole idea that is as dire and as dark as it can seem in today's day and age, God's already had it planned out from thousands of years before, and he's going to have it planned out till the very end of time. And there's no need to worry about whatever's going to occur. So that's the first point.
That's lovely. Yeah, I like that a lot.
You know, the second point is that with everything with Pachamama that's occurring in this whole field of ecofeminism, that's the term that's used for a lot of the scholastics that are pushing the narrative in that direction, so that to make Pachamama sort of a primary figure, to a rallying point for modern religions right now. Some might even say become a one world religion that's oriented around a figure like a Pachamama type thing. Guadalupe is a perfect foil for that.
Right.
Because she was obedient.
Because of her obedience and because of her subservience and because of the right order of understanding God, the faith, the church, relationships between men and women, all of it, it's all kind of wrapped up in this one image.
And basically, you know, we talked a little bit about soteriology last time and God's salvific plan for the world. But a huge part of it is the divine economy, or the way in which the salvific plan is played out, and Mary's role in that. Mary has an important role for the salvific plan, not only of the world, of course, in her role in bearing you know, God, Jesus Christ in her, but also the way in which she's been able to manifest herself, or she's been able to appear to different cultures. She did this in Mexico.
It was the first of the Marian apparitions,
or of the major Marian apparitions. But as we introduced with Flower World, we are making the case that actually there was a preparatio evangelica. The people were prepared to receive the evangelical gospel message, and Mary, because of her obedience and because of her role in this divine economy, plays a very, very, very important part. And right now, because of the Pachamama, because of that, we're going against two we're going against confusion and order, rather against right order, which is Mary and her willingness to play a part in this divine salvation.
Yeah, we kind of believe that Our Lady of Guadalupe is an unusual mechanism for evangelization in today's times, because she's hitting a lot of the major concerns that are clouding a lot of people's vision right now. And in this model and through the Flower World prophecy and a lot of the information that's attached to this, which is hitting it from so many different directions, we're kind of dealing with sort of how do you say, the darkness of the age, which is that of the intellect.
Right.
And because we're kind of going into this trying to take the information the secular scholars are bringing to Our Lady of Guadalupe and to the Flower World, archaeology and linguistics and all these different areas, and this synthesis of having to look honestly at the information and be completely unafraid of it, we're evangelizing the world in the way that it needs right now.
And can I just bring up something kind of quickly, just to clear up a thing. You know, there seems to be this idea that you know, the conquest of Mexico, or what happened in Mexico, can be brought down to two things: Aztec bad, Spanish good. And the thing is the reason why we need to clarify it. It's much more nuanced than that. Okay, yeah, what the Aztecs did, they did sacrifice hundreds and thousands of people, demonic influences, pagan influences. I mean, we're not Aztec apologists. But the thing, though, is that what has happened in other parts of the world, you have a prefigurement that has occurred, that is talked about by people like Blessed Catherine Emmerich, and people like Augustine, who didn't have so much a evil on one side, good on the other side, more of a Manichaeist type idea of a fight between good and evil. But of course, as Augustine came to become Christianized, he took on a Neoplatonic point of view, which basically all of it is good. Good is everywhere because all is God. And since God is everywhere, the evil that you see is not on equal par with the good. It's kind of like an aberration of the good. So if we believe that God is everything, and that actually he implants a means of, or a pathway of salvation, like he did for the Greeks, that a similar path was planted in the indigenous. And I think that the thing is, you know, I'm of Mexican descent. I know Stephanie is too. That the thing is that to be able to say that even as bad as the Aztecs got, and I hope we don't lose some of your audience here because we have to really explain it, even through that, via Flower World, this is our argument, he provided a pathway salvation. He actually went through a lot of trouble for these indigenous people.
He did.
So explain, so that we don't lose people.
Right.
Sure.
Explain why that isn't religious syncretism. I mean, I guess at some level we have to define terms. I'm a philosopher. That's what we do. Syncretism is when you take in the present elements of religion A and mix them into religion B. And in the present, we maintain at the same time these ostensibly, you know, mutually contradictory properties of religion A and B. That's not what you're suggesting. Because I mean, you guys, we've talked about it extensively. You know, the Aztec stuff isn't, on the one hand, it's not exaggerated. They were doing real child sacrifice. It is a kind of Baal worship, right? But you're just saying that through that, I like the analogy that you made, Joseph, between the Athenian Enlightenment, specifically Aristotle, laying the groundwork for salvation. And it's really Aristotelian hylomorphism that enables us to give a metaphysical account for what even happens to the Eucharist, as well as Aristotle's ethics is basically what the church adopted as the accurate description of natural ethics. So that's a really robust, that's a prefigurement on steroids, the Athenian Enlightenment, because Aristotle is smartest or second smartest guy who ever lived. I like that analogy. Can you flesh that out some by way of showing that this is genuinely not religious syncretism?
Right. I think that we got to look to Augustine I think that we need to think on Christian doctrine. I know you're an expert in that. I know we have to think a little bit of Boethius, and we have to think of Eusebius and Preparatio Evangelica. Basically, the idea here is that if God is good, that he's going to lay the groundwork to bring all people to him eventually, okay? Right. And he's going to provide a pathway. Now, the thing is that, and a lot of people don't realize this, and this is why we have to bring up Flower World, because Flower World and the Flower Song is actually a metaphorical philosophy for the Mesoamerican people. We talked last time that Miguel León Portilla brought about this idea of Nahua philosophy from the late 50s, from the 1950s. And within this philosophy, he had very similar concepts to the Greeks. One of them is beauty equals truth. Truth equals beauty. The Nahua people, the people of Mesoamerica, had this yearning for beauty and truth that was displayed through flower and song. And this went on for thousands of years. Now, the thing is that, see, this is where I think people like Warren Carroll, okay, who published a book, and basically to us, we think that Aztec bad, Spanish good kind of idea came up. That there was no path of redemption for the Aztecs, so to speak.
They were irredeemable.
But if you look at it through the Athenian point of view, okay, even there was a lot of similar things. There was an implantation of philosophical ideas which could eventually turn Christian, the Justinian argument, okay? That basically, that could lead a pathway, because in a way you have to have a moral basis in order to convert somebody to Christianity. That's really kind of the Justinian argument, that if you don't have a concept of morality or virtue, it's going to be harder to convert people. And I know we got a long slog, because a lot of people don't even know that there's such a thing as Nahua philosophy, or that the Aztecs actually wrote poetry, because it's just not talked about. People think apocalypto, and that kind of is like the end of their understanding of Mesoamerica.
They made a science of virtue,
right.
So a lot of people don't know
but
that.
It did exist, and scholars have been talking about this forever. What we are basically doing is we're tying that in now. That Nahua philosophy provided a natural bridge to the Christian conversion that happened. Those 9 million conversions that you're talking about in the decade of 1530, that through Guadalupe and through Juan Diego gathering the flowers in his tilma, that was a metaphor for the incarnation of truth.
That it can be possessed.
That truth can be possessed and be made incarnate on the earth. And that was the point from a deep philosophical level that converted the people of Mesoamerica during that time period.
Quickly, yeah.
Sure, and by means of making reference to conversion, is another sort of bare tell. It admits plainly of the idea of an anti-syncretistic view of Christianity and the Aztec religion, because I think the distinction we may be looking for here is, what's the difference between the Athenian Enlightenment kind of readying the way for the Christian worldview intellectually, is, and the, I guess what you're saying about the flower song, leading for millennia, leading the Mesoamerican peoples to Our Lady of Guadalupe, is that it's a rhetorical path. I mean, like in elections, they talk about, what's the path forward? Well, this is the rhetorical path that readies the way for full conversion. Yes. We're not talking about a logical path. One cannot be a Christian just by being a secular Aristotelian. Now, not all Aristotelians are Catholic. Not all Aristotelians are Thomistic Aristotelians. If you're an Aristotelian, like there are lots at even Notre Dame that are just secular, well, that's not conversion. One should use the Aristotelian hylomorphism to explain what they've already grasped in faith, explain what they've already grasped without the Aristotelian lexicon in the Christian philosophy, and then help themselves to convert. That's what you're saying, right? There's a difference between a logical path and a rhetorical path. I feel like that's what you're saying.
Well, definitely we're opening up a line of discussion that is never really, hasn't been discussed. And I know before you had asked us how have we advanced the flower song hypothesis that we have. Well, we've talked to theologians about this. We've read upon this. I mean, we've had some people who've really helped us and to really frame this. And it is along these lines. It is a comparison to the Greeks because it's very similar, but a lot different. I mean, the Mesoamerican is more metaphorical. It's more based on beauty. It's more based on experience, and we can get into it if you want to. But the thing is that the thing that is probably brand new and perhaps might be very interesting to your audience is to be able to talk about this level of discussion in regard to those conversions that happened. Most people only think of, well, they were converted because of roses out of season, okay? And, you know, we start off with this line in our book that we're working. I mean, there's a historian from the 18th century who says, you know, roses out of season is unremarkable. Like, how could anybody be converted on roses out of season? Right. And especially since actually they can grow in
that was
Mexico
a devoted
City.
Catholic historian.
Right. And I know we're scandalizing a lot of people, but that's okay. But there had to be another reason, and it was deep and it was philosophical, and it had to do with the act of gathering the roses, the gathering of the multitude of aromatic flowers, to be more precise. That act was the actual finding truth via beauty, or the metaphor of beauty
made incarnate.
So you know, the idea of aesthetics, the idea of beauty equal meaning truth. I mean, we can bring in so many different examples through the ages of how beauty equals truth, and why is that? It has to do with transcendence, as in the same plane of morality and virtue. These are transcendent properties. Beauty is transcendent, so is truth.
And that forms the foundation for understanding the rest of philosophy, having that understanding.
Right. And that is really a point that is made when this idea of Nahuatl philosophy was brought about. The Mesoamerican people did have this concept, and it was related to this narrative of a singer traveling through the universe looking for flowers. It sounds very simple, but what it is mankind actually looking for truth. And when Juan Diego finds those flowers and puts them in his still and brings them back to earth, the truth actually kind of passes through a veil of reality. I don't know, but those flowers became incarnate, and the bishop saw them. Bishop Zumarraga saw them. So I hope I'm answering your questions. There seems to be so many different things.
Well, sorry for bringing it so far back down to earth, but we're about out of time. Bring us out close us on what is the tilma? I mean, what's the science of the tilma? This might not be your guys' special area of extra deep expertise. You're clearly, both of you, incredibly knowledgeable about the history and the meaning and the real mythos, as Tolkien would call it, of Flowerland and even all the up-to-date scholarship. That's awesome. But on a much more basic level, the tilma will always be relevant because it's been, you know, scientifically shown to be non-elemental, right? The substrate of the flower, kind of like the three-dimensional image on the Shroud of Turin. It's miraculous, right? The mere existence of the tilma is miraculous. Is this not right? Can we just get really basic by way of closing here?
Well, let me see. I mean, there's no doubt that there's miraculous properties.
Yes.
To the tilma. I mean, it should have been deteriorated by now. As we said before, there was that major incident in 1921 that tried to destroy it. It was not destroyed.
There's no paint.
There's no paint. There's no elements.
Yeah, in 1973, there was an infrared study that was done by somebody named Philip Callahan. And he made some interesting discoveries. He says there's no brush strokes. Right. There was no sketch underneath it, which is unheard of. All paintings would have had sketches underneath them. The tilma is extremely important to the story. And the way that we explain it, though, just kind of quickly, is that the tilma is really important to what we call the establishment of a pilgrimage site. Okay. Now, why is this important? Because the millions of conversions, when you look at the historical documentation, they don't talk about people going to Tepeyac to see the tilma. Only one account of many accounts even mentions Tepeyac. The conversions happened on the outskirts of Mexico, of people coming in whom we know they couldn't have seen the tilma. But what we're saying is that the conversions happened because of the story and because of this intellectual conversion that happened on a deep philosophical level.
But the
tilma was important to establish a locus, a focal point, a physical place where all people, the Spanish, the indigenous, the mixed, the Creoles, the mestizos, all the people could come together
and today the whole world,
and to ask their petitions to the Blessed Virgin Mary. And that was so critical for the beginning of the mestizo race, because it brought the races together. And number two, the beginning of Mexico as a nation. So we're it's critical that, and that was the tilma. That was the tilma that did it, the establishment of a pilgrimage site, not necessarily the reason why the Indians converted. Okay, and we hope we can explain ourselves later on that, because that might rub some people the wrong way. But we think in a way that we're providing a better explanation, because there's just too many holes in the stories, and these holes is where the academics are able to come in and use it as fodder to destroy the entire story. So we have to deal with these issues.
Right. Well, you guys are doing admirable work, and every time I talk to you, I learn more. I hope everyone out there feels the same way. Tell us when you're working on a book. When will it be done? What are your other Guadalupe related projects and happenings? And what's the haps?
Well, we are working on actually two versions of the book. One is a short version, which we're hoping to have done by fall. This is our goal, fall, early winter. It'll be a small 120 to 150 page book, and it's focusing primarily on the actual story itself between the old poetry and the Nicomapoa. The larger version will be tackling all of these ancillary questions, and it's going to be pretty huge. We were working on it for a while and realizing it's probably going to be like an 800, 900 page book. So that'll be released about hopefully a couple years after, down the road after the little book. So we'll definitely keep you updated.
Good.
But the goal is the end of this year.
And also, there's a possibility that my main gig is a composer, and I'm hoping that I'll actually write something of an oratorio or something based on the narrative of Guadalupe, between Juan Diego and Guadalupe, the Nicomapoa story. So I'm hoping to compose that in the next year or two. Beautiful.
There's no message, right? There's no marquee message of Guadalupe the way there are with some of the other Marian apparitions. What do you say to that in a line, in a word?
Well, I would say it would go back to what you were talking about. For some reason, even though there's not a specific Fatima message or Lourdes or anything like that, it's ubiquitous right now. The Pachamama thing is all over the place right. And what happened with Guadalupe and the conversions were sincere. The conversions were authentic. If you look at the accounts, there was no doubt that those people were hungering for an authentic baptism. They were not going with idols, stuffed in their pants or something like, I don't know. It was very, very sincere. There was no mixture. It was Christianity that they wanted, and a true baptism they want. Now with this Pachamama, it's pushing syncretism. It actually,
we're back in a pagan culture now.
We're going back to this idea that Catholicism can blend with other religions to create a third religion. That's actually that's the definition of syncretism right there. So even though there's not a specific message, it's kind of all around us. We're like swimming in it right now.
I feel like Our Lady Guadalupe is an anchor because of everything that's occurring, and getting back to that hope message. It's a message of hope. I know it sounds chintzy, maybe in the context of everything we're talking about, but hope is a very tangible thing. And because of all of the intellectual confusion that's occurring right now, she's providing an anchor between the past and the present and the future, as well as between all the races, which is a huge issue right now. So if I can give another application for today, it's unity and hope.
Yes.
So
Unity
between
and hope.
people.
Mhm.
In a legit way, in a
legitimate way.
to Christ through his blessed mother way. I like that. I like that very much. People out there, speaking of hope, if you live, and I'm speaking, I guess, to you, Joseph and Monique too, if you live in a blue state and you need to get to a red state, which is all of you, do seek out realestateforlife.org. They can help you do like I did and get from the bluest of the blue to the reddest of the red. That's realestateforlife.org. Also, I had a quick announcement out there. I will be doing about twice a month a differently themed podcast. It won't be on YouTube here, but it will be where the people who upload my podcast can get my podcast on more secular issues. And I'll have a co-host for that, and it'll just be twice a month. But it'll be more a Catholic guy, two Catholic dudes talking secular issues. And by way of spreading hope, I think that's the way to do it now. Not the syncretistic way, like Monique, you've been saying this entire time, but the rhetorical way, where you show through the world. We're called to be in, but not of the world. We're thinking of calling this podcast "In, but not of." There's too many trads. We get caught up in echo chambers, and we just have given up. It feels often to me when I'm around too many trads, which is, the people that I interact with online, like we've given up evangelizing. And that's the beautiful, to me, that's the message of Guadalupe, is evangelization, our sense of missiology that the Protestants are actually so strong with. The Great Commission by Christ from Matthew and Luke's gospel. We are called to bring the message of Jesus, the good news, to all the world and convert it 100% to Jesus. Well, trads are like, oh, I have this truth. And too often it's like, we don't want to share it. We're just busy arguing with people we consider, Luddite, cavemen, normie Catholics. It's like, okay, forget that. What I want to do is go out and convert these people, convert these sinners, and make something beautiful. Yeah, your message of hope is inspiring, and Guadalupe's as well. Well, thank you guys again for joining me. God bless you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, we'll bring you on again, maybe when the book comes out. But I really do like this stuff. It's fascinating.
Whenever you want, Tim.
Give us a
We love
holler.
it.
Cool. We'll have more Marian apparition shows coming up in the next 2 weeks for the month of May. Obviously, one for Fatima, one for Akita, one for Lourdes, much overlooked Lourdes, and those will be headed your way. You guys keep your head on a swivel, stay tough, keep it together, and know that God wills it. Deus Vult. God bless you. Joseph and Monique, thanks for coming on the show today.
Bye. Take care.